Hello, I am Douglas Saltis, editor-in-chief of BetaKit, and I haven't had a professional haircut in 7 months. Thank you for joining us on this uppish panel entitled We're Still Hiring, Scaling Culture Pre- and Post-Pandemic. Before we get into the meat of the conversation, I want to introduce our panelists today. We have Chantel Grindle, Chief Human Resource Officer at Bold Commerce, Stephanie Boone, Head of People and Operations at 54E Dev Studios, Jean Parchewski, VP of People and Operations at Vendasta, and Leah Fochuk, Head of People at Semend. And I think this is going to be a really interesting conversation because we have companies with 3 employees and those looking to add over 1,000 in the next year. So the focus on this conversation is going to be tangible takeaways for companies in the audience. That's you. Hi. Looking to scale based upon what these companies have learned and maybe what they wish they knew at the beginning of the pandemic as opposed to now. And I think because this is uppish and we are doing this remotely, I think starting off talking about the work from home, work at the office split is the best place to do it. Stephanie, I'm going to start with you because you're in the interesting position of actually having changed jobs during the pandemic, which is pretty cool and exciting. And when we were talking before this panel, you had noted that you very much had employees that wanted to come in and were not 100% interested in working remotely. What was it like looking to support them at a time in which everyone else is being told to self-isolate?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, S Media, I think, when the pandemic hit, a lot of us HR professionals out there were just thinking, oh my God, what do we do here? We were quick to shift because S Media, a majority of the team was fully remote already. So we had about 25 people in the Regina office, and we flipped the switch. It was literally on a Friday, and we said, you know what, guys, we're going remote. We'll work through the weekend. We'll get communication out. We'll lay everything out what that's going to look like. But right away, we kind of had some pushback on some people just not really set up at home. I wasn't really set up at home either. I had 2 kids. School was just coming out too. So there was a lot of things that we kind of had to, click into overdrive just to help support those people. So we, some people took their workstations home with them. So we had stand-up desks, we had good chairs. We really had a great ergonomic setup at the office. So I think a few of the people that actually were the ones that were maybe giving the pushback, we just said, you know what, if it helps, just take your workstation home right now until we can get some things sorted out. So that was kind of, one of the biggest things was just trying to get people situated.
Yeah, and I think as we're all doing this right now, thinking of where they're situated in the home as I record from my dining room. Now, Jean, you're kind of in an interesting position at Vendasta because you now have up to about 100 people back in the office. And interestingly, you were telling me it was predominantly the sales team that's moved back. Can you explain a little bit about what's going on with your sales team?
Yeah, for sure. First, we opened it up for anyone that wanted to be in the office could be. So we kept our offices open, but we had at first maybe 15, 20 people. So if they lived with 3 other roommates and 5 cats, then they usually came back pretty quick. The rest chose to stay home. But we found the group that came back the fastest was our sales and support teams. So that's where we're hiring the fastest too. And to be able to work really close side by side, hear what somebody's saying on a phone call, and how people are interacting with partners. It helped with training, and just that energy that comes with the sales teams was crucial. They missed that the most. One thing that we did that I mentioned, I think was we've seen really important, and this helped a lot coming back, is we bought these wristbands. They're just kind of like rubber, red, yellow, and green. So if you're back in the office, but you want to make sure that people are keeping six feet away and you're just a little bit more unsure, then you can wear the red wristband. And if you're wearing a green one, it means that even if I'm getting a coffee, you can come up and talk to me. And it just helped easily identify who is more comfortable with it. Because sometimes you race up and want to talk to somebody quick, and it's a quick visual of who's more comfortable being within 6 feet, and then who wants you to keep their distance. I think we should keep
That's
them all
really,
the time.
yeah, probably. Presence is important in a pandemic and understanding that. And I think one of the things that we're going to talk about a lot today is how a lot of what we would take for granted in a normal work environment now has to be explicit and pre-planned. So I'm really interested in exploring that. But Gene, just as a follow-up, what was the response from maybe the rest of the company hearing that the sales team like really wanted to get in and mix it up together? Were there other teams that were like, was it a team by team decision even, or how did that decision kind of flow out through the rest of the company?
Yeah, we did it in phases. So we brought back the SDR team first, then the BDR team, just to make sure that we had the infrastructure in place, mapped out our floors, made sure our desks were separated. We have a food staff, so we wanted to make sure that they're prepared, that it's no longer buffet style, and what does it mean for our kitchens and spaces like that. So we sent out a survey to make sure that we could gauge everybody's feedback, and we use Slack pretty aggressively to make sure that we're gathering people's opinions on it. So
Okay.
that was
I
fun.
wanted to open this up to everyone else, and maybe even actually starting with you, Chantel. I'm wondering where your company's at, and if there's any catering to different team needs. Obviously, Bold Commerce being going to be pretty dev heavy. Was there a specific dev response in being excited to possibly work from home all the time, or a desire to work from the office as well? Is everyone else having to balance a bit of a mix right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think our wide range of employees and employee base, it's been different. Being in Manitoba, I feel like we were one of the last provinces here in the prairies to kind of get hit with the urgency. So we had the experience of hearing what other provinces were doing and what other companies were doing. So that was very helpful for us in planning. And I think we did it on kind of a stage approach of sort of like, we'll try this for one day and see what our gaps are. And then, much like others, we started to let them take equipment and such home. But we've been flexible with a lot of things. So just recently, we onboarded a group of 12 into our merchant success department. So we had about 7 or 8 days where people came into the office to support the training, because to the point of Gene, looking to your left and right and being able to ask a question is much easier than, trying to log into a Zoom meeting or a Google meeting, especially for some of those little pieces. So
Yeah.
that was just a lot smoother. And, I think one of the big successes of our organization is the collaboration that happens, and, the collision conversations. I think our CEO was using that term, and it took me a while to kind of get it. And I was like, oh, yeah, it's just, those conversations just that happen that aren't scheduled, that you just pop into somebody else's office for. So being that everyone at first went 100% remote, no one was left out of any conversations. Everybody was doing the same thing, connecting the same ways. So now we have absolutely opened it up. Some people, have the roommates and the cats and are like, I got to come to the office for sure.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's just a well-being. Like for me, I look forward to my Wednesdays when I pop into the office, and I have that little break. So,
Forced to
wide
put on
variety.
outside clothes.
Well, yeah, I never thought I was going to be that person, but let me tell you. um, so for sure, it's a wide range of people that we have, and encouraging groups to come in as needed. Team meetings. We have a beautiful atrium at one of our locations, so we can socially distance there, and we've had some meetups and things like that there. And we also had to have some virtual QSMs and things
Mhm.
like that. So, I guess we can take this all as a lot of really good learnings about how we can be expanding our organization to things that we thought were barriers, that maybe we thought, oh, we can't, go to that province or, expand to the US because of the distance. Well, I think we all figured out pretty quick that if we were going to survive, we needed to figure it out. And so much of like the organization starting in our core department, it was really necessary that I think we all jump into it with both feet.
Yeah, that okay, and I think we're going to talk about that a lot. What you were even just talking about, that level of collaboration, which I think most companies consider to be their culture, like the ability to pop in, have those conversations, the interpersonal exchanges. All of that now has to be kind of powered by or intermediated in some way by technology. So Leah, let's get you in here and maybe even just switch it up, because you're obviously dealing with not only employees currently in the company, but the number of employees you're currently bringing to the company, hiring at a high rate. Shout outs to Danielle Torrey, who recently joined the Cement team. But I'm just wondering, like when we were talking before, one of the first things you had mentioned was kind of like the need to onboard the culture and the values. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what that process looked like.
Yeah, I think when we looked at hiring, I mean, we knew we were on a growth trajectory. And so during COVID alone, we've hired, I think, over 130 people brought on board. And so you really have to make sure, obviously, at the beginning that you're bringing the right people on board. But when you don't have, those interactions, those, interpersonal interactions, it is a little bit harder to really, I think, we had to think about, like, how do you embed that culture? And so part of, one of the ways that we try to ensure that we instill that and that we set people up for success right away is, we've implemented since COVID, like a whole new immersive onboarding program. So all of our new hires, they start day one. They have an entire cohort that they go through for this 5-day program. And right out of the gate, we're talking about our goals, our vision, our values, our culture, and so we're setting them up right out of the gate, so they have a really good sense. But then as they go through the program, right, they're introduced, to all the different teams, and really, not just that, but like how we work together, not just like what we do and how we do it, but how we work together. And then through this program, they get to know people from all different parts of the organization, and really kind of, like I said, is meant to set them up for success. But I think from that values perspective, for when we're hiring people, like, it's so important, obviously, that you're hiring good people. So having a good sense of what your culture is and what your values are right out of the gate, so that when recruiters are out there talking to people, or sourcing people, like they know exactly what they're looking for. So at the beginning, even though we didn't have our values articulated necessarily, so that was just something that we've also gone through recently, where we've really just like solidified those, and now we can actually operationalize them. But we had a good sense at the beginning, so that when we were hiring people, we were hiring the right people, like people who already, embodied our values and we knew would be a really good culture fit. That culture piece was so important at the beginning stages of the recruitment process. And so that just really, I think, allowed us to, again, hire the right people, the people that were going to, just fit in, but also like excel and succeed within our environment. So.
Gotcha. So the immersive component isn't, hey, we're all at home, so that, like, on board via VR. It's being really explicit in articulating those values and making sure that everyone's living up to it in a way they might just kind of catch on at the office. Okay. Just actually maybe start here. Show of hands. How many of the companies on the panel today are like actively hiring? That's a lot. I guess we should beta kit as well. Boom. Okay. Stephanie, let's go back to you, because one of the things that you had talked about in terms of software that was really interesting was recognition software. And that's kind of the follow-up to onboarding the team members. It's making sure that their work is still being noticed and valued when they're possibly sitting alone at home in front of a screen for long hours. So can you just talk about that process, and maybe even some of the one-on-one stuff that you guys were looking to bring into the company as well?
Yeah, for sure. So as soon as COVID hit as well, one of the other things that we really looked at was the well-being, the employee well-being. And we put a lot of focus there. And one of the things, like you said, was that recognition piece, and, employees still feeling like their voice was heard without everyone sitting side by side anymore. Mm-hmm. So we added in a couple things, just kind of preliminary right away. One of them being, one night I was up till midnight trying to like drastically figure out all of these things that we needed to do as a people and culture team at S Media, things that we needed to implement to get this all under control. And I was reading a blog post and I came across a software called Assembly. And it is basically a kudos platform or employee recognition platform. And I was looking into it, and it was they were doing a free version of it during COVID for employers. So I quickly did some more research, and we put it together and had it rolled out the next day. And we talked with my team, and we said, let's roll this out and just have this to start, just to get people kind of like bought in and understanding the platform. Let's just roll out kind of like a weekly people and culture shout out. And let's focus on some people that maybe we don't have as much encounters with on a weekly basis. So we really kind of focused on the fully remote team. So the team in Bangladesh, or we had some people in the Philippines as well. So we really tried to focus on our ad ops team or the development team, or so be it. But basically, you could put the kudos out there to the team for going above and beyond, and it really could be anything. And it integrated with Slack, so it was super simple to use. And it literally within a week went kind of viral within our company. And, we just got a ton of good feedback on it. And like I said to you guys before, we had, some of our developers in Bangladesh giving kudos to our product managers in the Regina office too. So it really just took off, and it was really, rewarding and nice to see the team coming together and like recognizing pieces that, we didn't have a full on recognition program before that.
In different places as well, right? Because there's no remote team. Everyone's remote. There's no annex there. It's all everyone's as displaced. Okay, that's really interesting. Chantel, maybe we can go to you, because when we were talking with you, this blew my mind. And this, no judgment here from the journalist, but I will say, as someone that manages a team himself, fighting the communication balance of like meeting itis versus making sure everyone is on board. And you were telling us that at Bold you have 3 town halls a week. Explain to us how you have 3 town halls a week. That's crazy, I think.
Yeah. So I guess it started just out of, we're in a global pandemic. How is everybody feeling? And the worst thing that we thought we could do, or people would be sitting at home just not knowing. So like just not knowing what else is happening, and maybe, the leads are busy or communication. So it started with just that early phase, like let's have a Monday morning update with everybody and just let them know anything we know that's happening in the office, in the city, and anything anyone else wants to share. And it's like, we do have sort of a weekly department update on, Confluence, about this was just also just something to get everybody live. And then we always had Friday town halls, and that was more department specific, grab the beer, sit down, and it was more of a like 1 hour, good way to end your week. So then we added in a 12:30 lunch hour on Wednesday. So a little bit more casual. A lot of people sharing different things that are happening. Some of it was even well-being support initiatives that people were sharing, tools and resources that we have. But once again, if there was anything pressing that we wanted to share, we had all of these different opportunities to share with the entire organization. They're recorded, so if you can't make that time slot, you can definitely watch it later. And yeah, there was a few comments going, is this overkill? But we really tried to balance with everybody. Like, if we're not communicating and sharing with you, it's the worst thing that we can do, especially in this current situation. So if it's literally like 20 to 30 minutes on Monday, 20 to 30 minutes on Wednesday, and then the town hall on Friday is kind of the standard, I don't think we're asking that much. And the gains from it have been remarkable, and I think have really showed a lot in just our organization of how we've all really still come together and felt connected. And there's always going to be room for improvement for all of these things, making sure the content is value add, and things like that. But overall, like, so proud of how the team has really banded together for this situation that we're all in.
Yeah, and it's asynchronous as well, so there's a bit of an opt-in, catch up when you can, but not being outside of it if you don't miss the meeting, which I think is important. And now you're doing some interesting work with recognition as well. Can you explain what these WOW cards are?
Yeah, so WOW cards were something we started so long ago at Bold, but it more or less was like, I guess just kind of a catch on like, wow, that's great. But it was supposed to just kind of be like the same kudos things, but it was hard copies. So we quickly, switched over, had links that people could fill out their wow cards just about great things. And they would be read out at the town halls. And at first, our culture specialist, Marcy, was reading them all out. And then we thought, well, why not layer it in? And so we started to have executives and co-founders reading them. So I just found it to be really, I don't know, uplifting. And the co-founder and the executives were getting engaged in workspaces that they weren't normally. And then sometimes, there was employees or builders, as we call them, like reading out ones for specific employees that helped them out during the week. So once again, just kind of bringing everybody together in a different way, and just nice that we were able to shift so many different things that we did to electronic versions. And, having fun with the wow cards, people would sometimes dress up, but even in the town halls, like at, grad time, there was a lot of, talk about the grads and how they didn't get to have them. So one Friday we did Formal Friday, and everybody shared their grad pictures. So,
Oh,
a
no.
lot of things about the pandemic are not great, but the ways that we've been able to connect on different levels, and maybe people that they would never have brought their grad picture into the office to share. I know I wouldn't have, but to post some things in our Slack different channels for fun. We kind of got to celebrate some of those different connections that we've all been able to have too, and different ways we're trying to have fun, stay connected, and get through this.
Gotcha. Okay. If anyone wants to share some photos during this panel, I am 100% for it. Jean, we already talked about like you've been moving teams into the office because they want to stay better connected, collaborating, maybe bouncing that energy off of. But I think one of the things that Vendasta is doing that's so interesting, it's like the simplest thing in the world. But I think this is one example of something that every company that's watching this right now could implement next week. It's low friction and could provide some of that connectivity. Can you talk about what you're doing with Google Hangouts and just kind of the open rooms that you're using?
Yeah. We've always used Google as kind of our communication or platform of choice. So when we have meetings, for the longest time, every meeting that you book already has a calendar invite, or in the calendar invite is the Google Hangout link. So anyone who is even in office and in a different building. So we had to really, we had gotten a new building about 6 months prior to everyone going remote. So we had already started to leverage tools that you can't just run across the hallway into a meeting room to talk to people. So we had to come up with some ideas. And so every Google Calendar invite has the Hangout link, and anyone can join it. And then on our intranet, we also have links to common rooms. So every team has a room, and they might go at a certain time each day where they just open it up. Even if they're not openly conversing, it's that everyone's going to be there. So if I want to talk to a certain development team, or I'm a PM and I want to talk to a designer, I can just go there and go to their link, and everyone's there at one time. Makes it really easy and accessible to meet with people.
Yeah. So this is kind of like the company knowing when there's open door policy that everyone can kind of get in, but also separate from like a scheduled meeting with an agenda, this is a way for team members to just kind of be near each other in a really like low pressure way to engage. Right. I think that's really cool. At BetaKit, we do some things like that on Friday where it's just us just connecting and chatting. And I think that's something that for all the companies watching this who maybe feel a little displaced or feel like those barriers to connecting are a little bit higher now, when it's like something that's got to be scheduled in your calendar using tech, that these kind of open rooms is a great way to do it. So I think that's probably a good transition to maybe like our final section before we move to the Q&A. And that's like scaling these good ideas as early as possible. It is somehow September of 2020. All of you have been dealing with this for as long as I've been needing a professional haircut, about 7 months. I'm wondering which of these things, or just even in terms of scaling culture inside your rapidly growing companies anyways, that you would wish that you had maybe implemented earlier, or things that you've just learned that if you've implemented from the beginning that would have just helped as part of the scaling process. And I'm going to be daring, and during a recorded panel with 5 people, just open this up, and whoever wants to go can just jump in on this?
We're all so polite. We don't want to go first.
We're all so polite.
I can jump in. So I think for me, I started with the organization. We were only 60 people, and now we're, I don't know, I want to say close to 360. And I knew early on they wanted to grow a lot. So I did kind of continually ask myself, is this scalable? Is this scalable? But I also, Google Sheets is free, and all the Google tools, they're not nearly as costly. So for us, and for me, it was a lot of, Google Sheets for applicant tracking and things like that. So definitely for anyone that's planning to do a lot of hiring, need to convince whoever you need to convince that you need to invest in an applicant tracking system, because using our personal email is just not, it might work for you, but it does not work for us. And thinking just about how to be efficient and manpower. It's also better for the leaders as well. So applicant tracking systems, whether it's just sorting the emails or giving access to resumes and things like that. So that would definitely be one of my first pieces of advice to those that are starting, at the beginning. And if you plan on doing lots of hiring, it helps with like putting out ads for all your positions as well and things like that. So lots of different tools, and it might seem like it comes at a high cost, but it's definitely worth to get started on sooner than later.
Okay. Can I just follow up on that? Because you brought up something that I think is really useful, particularly when we're talking about, HR as a vertical of business, something that most early scaling businesses don't probably have right away. It's considered the luxury that gets added on after the funding. I'm also very cognizant of the fact that I am a white guy moderating a panel with 4 professional women in a space that is predominantly, I think, leans that way. Also coming from a marketing communications background, I know that at some tech companies, it's difficult to justify the costs of things that aren't being asked for by engineers and developers. And I'm just wondering if there are maybe some people earlier in their careers or senior in their careers at early stage companies where they're having to make that justification. If anyone has some tips or some recommendations to help people who maybe aren't thinking about this as much as they're thinking about building their product to really understand and own it.
I guess the cost, you can bring in the costs of things and some data. So just the costs of a bad hire, what that means to a company, the training that it takes if you hire somebody that isn't the right fit, and how to quickly change that if that happens. So I guess coming to it with some data and showing the return on your investment when you hire somebody good and when you're able to hire a lot of people quickly, that's always a good starting point, I think.
Okay.
I think like backpedaling to, like, I 100% agree on the ATS. That was a life-changing experience for me at GasBuddy in the early days. But I had a similar thing there too, where it was, Jazz HR was $129 a month US or whatever the cost was.
Mm-hmm.
But my inbox was getting flooded with emails and resumes. So at that point, you really need to think of like the candidate experience too. If, the nice part about these ATSs is if you, somebody, puts in their application, it prompts a response back to them. So they're getting some sort of communication from the company, which you can set. But if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's applying, you're maybe missing the boat on some really great people in there because they're getting buried in your inbox too. Or maybe there's a theme happening where people are out in the community saying, oh, I applied at GasBuddy and nobody's getting back to me there ever, because it's either, maybe going to spam or something too. So there's that candidate experience side too that I think is a good thing and very important nowadays for sure.
Well, and Stephanie, to give you some praise as well here, this is also a situation where if there is a process that functions without any hesitation inside of a company, and you don't know the software that's being used internally to manage that, it probably means that there's a human being managing that process very successfully, taking up a large amount of their time. So maybe that's the one key takeaway here for some early stage founders who maybe really focus on the product, but are learning to build the business component, is to listen to people like Stephanie when they're like, hey, I have my inbox is overflowing with this. Maybe we should get the software. I think it's probably like a great place to end it. I know we're going to go right to the QA. There's probably tons of questions people want to ask. We didn't talk a lot about hiring because I assumed that's what the audience wants to talk about. But I just wanted to thank all the panelists for participating in this conversation, teaching me a lot about how I should be running my business better. And then, we'll see you all in a few minutes in the live Q&A.